Welcome back. South Africa's labour market is hitting a significant milestone in early 2026. For the first time in over 5 years, the official unemployment rate has dipped to 31.4%, the lowest level since the 2020 COVID-19 shock. While the headline numbers look promising, they tell a story of a job market in deep transition. Work in South Africa is now no longer just about recovery. It's about a structural shift toward formalisation, green energy and digital fluency. Let's talk more about this with senior lecturer at the Centre for Future of Work at the University of Pretoria, Dr. Sean Kruger. Dr. Kruger, very good evening to you. Thank you so much for your time. Well, a very good way to start off 2026, and also the Statistician General saying we are starting to turn the corner. A 0.5% decrease in our high unemployment rate, cause to celebrate?
I mean, it's a start. I mean, considering that everything's going as it is, especially with the role of AI and digital transformation, I think it's at least we're making some progress. But I think there is a bigger problem at hand that we do need to still tackle, though.
Yeah, absolutely, because we're still sitting at a 31.4 unemployment rate, which is still remarkably high. But should we maintain this 0.5% decline over each quarter, for instance? That would bring us to like a 2% drop annually. And speaking hypothetically, would this minimal drop in the unemployment stats of 2% per annum perhaps lead us to a positive trajectory or a realistic hope?
Well, we are at least moving into, you've mentioned the green talent areas. So we are at least seeing new forms of work coming into play here. And I think part and parcel of the unemployment is bringing in the informal and actually tracking the jobs correctly. So I do feel that if we are making those progress steps, that we are at least making some impact. But more can be done. And I think there's key areas that we can look to leverage those areas. But I think our youth need to start to see those impacts in real time.
Yeah, and you're saying more can be done and we should leverage off that. What more would you say should be done?
So, I mean, in that sense, a lot of the times, let's split this out into 3 segments. What about school leavers? I think there should be clear artisanal roles in that. And I mean, at the State of the Nation report as well, we need to get our TVETs and artisanal hands-on skills ready. But my concern that we look at is our graduates, whereas it used to be a very almost guaranteed point of entry into the market. It's not that they're not getting jobs, but they're struggling to do so. So I think what we can do there is help them build a portfolio of evidence that makes them not only locally relevant, but also globally. Because think about it this way, when you create an online business or something of those sorts, you're not competing just locally, you're competing on the international scale. So what we can do is start to prepare our students and school leavers and graduates for entering those markets. Something that I think that we should never overlook, and it's a point of concern, even for experts like myself, is what about those people in existing roles that might not exist in a year or two's time?
Yeah.
So what happens to those people? In that sense, we need to look to repackage their skills and execute it in a much better and more efficient way. And that's where that digital literacy comes into play. How are you using your computer and how can you articulate your business value and enter into the market? Getting clients, doing sales, and automating workflows, as an example, has become a standard trend. But then you speak to people and they can't really have access to even use a computer, and they are going to be left behind.
And speaking about online businesses and different ways of employment as well, I'd like us to break it down from, the permanent jobs versus the contractual jobs in South Africa, and which one of these is growing far more quicker, but also this growth in the gig economy and freelance work as well.
All right. So, I mean, permanent roles still hold the bulk of what we do. And I think what the problem is, the contract work is increasing slowly, but the shift here is not necessarily the disappearance of permanent roles. It's the precarity in the roles that are being created. More hours, weaker benefits, and more dependence on that continuous renewal of work. Then you enter the gig economy. I was also listening to recent articles and we worked on the Fair Work report. Drivers are exposed to key security dangers. So even though they can get work and access it through the internet or through these platforms, they're very precarious in if the platform changes a rule, they are left out on the street. There's no unionization and standard forms of employment protection. So I do think in that sense, we need to look at permanent employment, make sure that they are kept safe, transitioning right skills. And with the gig economy, it is a very positive thing. I see it as a good thing because it creates access to markets much quicker than before. But we do need to be very careful in how we can access and protect those people entering those markets, especially our youth and when they're struggling to find work. Because a lot of the times, a single platform might take complete control and you've got no say in your employment hours.
And with that as well, with the gig economy and freelancers, studies are showing that companies are finding that it's far more cost effective to hire a freelancer or somebody participating in gig per gig role. But that being said as well, there are those consequences or the challenges that it also faces as well, such as not being protected, but also that work being seasonal. Will that then give us a fluctuating unemployment stats that we could look at in the future?
So it really does depend on the industry and whether it's gig work or non-contract and semi-work. Think agricultural. It's very seasonal in its very nature. So we do see those fluctuations cascading out. But with gig work, if we can stimulate the economy, and especially in certain sectors, we can see people contracting them out as and when they're required. So I think the key unlocking mechanism here is creating those opportunities. But we are seeing a seasonal fluctuation in not only gig work, but in sectors that we know are relevant to that, especially tourism, agriculture, because as we all go on holiday, those sectors' jobs opportunities increase. But now when we're back at it, it does change. But I think the problem with gig work is we need to or just split that. Is it your ride hailing and food delivery services, but also about content creation? What about intellectual work? It's something that we shouldn't overlook, because that can be perhaps a much more stable income stream as well and not as affected through seasonality.
Yeah, that's an important point on intellectual property as well when it comes to content work. And speaking about tech and apps, Dr. Kruger, how are people using apps to get jobs? And is this accounted for in the jobs data as well?
In a perfect world, it would be, but unfortunately, that's not the case. So Stats SA does a fantastic job, but certain things are overlooked. So with the app-based world, let's take it from a user. What we've seen is a lot of the ride-hailing and food delivery services clientele switch apps based on time of day. Who gives the best rate? Who has access to clients? Who has the best turnaround time on getting access to it? So on the gig economy side of things, it's such a difficult thing to track because one person is using multiple platforms to access the work. So for them, great opportunity. For data tracking, we can't really get an accurate representation of what's really happening out there. In terms of contractual work, it's easier, you pay taxation and those kind of things. And that's where that informal economy comes into play. Are you doing contract work or informal economy work that's not being tracked for taxation purposes?
So if that data was accounted for, would you think we'd see a drastically different statistics when it comes to our unemployment rates?
I wouldn't say drastic, but I remember an article by Capitec that said it paints a much different picture when you see what's running through people's bank accounts, that it might not be a fixed income, but income is being generated in varying ways. And I think in that sense, if we could really lock in from an informal economy perspective, we might see lower unemployment. But in that sense, the data around it is very precarious. It's unclear. So we can't say for a certainty that is the case. But when you look at banks and how they see the money coming in and rolling out through seasonal opportunities, I think that we might have a bit of a less unemployment rate that is occurring in the country. But I think the danger there is those people earning income, they're very precarious. And I think their work hours and the lack of protection doesn't justify just what they have to do to make that income.
Dr. Kruger, when you mention work hours as well, people who would also be affected by this are remote workers, people who have sought employment from foreign companies as well, and sometimes having to work with in terms of different time zones too. Are we seeing an uptick in remote working as well?
So I think in the perfect world for the knowledge workers, there is very strong pursuance after that. South Africa is a beautiful country, And relative to the rest of the world, our skills are very affordable. Yes, our universities are expensive, but comparatively abroad, it's a lot more expensive. So our South African expertise is cheap for remote work. So we are seeing uptake and pursuance of remote workers doing labor and very complex tasks for overseas companies. But at that very risk, we see those digital nomads moving into South Africa, working for abroad companies. And that's where that question comes in. If you're South African, you pay South African taxation. If you have external digital nomads coming in, working in South Africa, but they generate income elsewhere. So again, it skews the statistics of what's occurring. But to answer your question, we are seeing a very big push for knowledge workers wanting to work remotely in South Africa, offering amazing services at a much more affordable rate than overseas competitors.
Yeah, and thanks for that reminder as well, that it also happens on the inverse too, with digital nomads who also want to work from South Africa, it being such a beautiful country too. What we mentioned, Dr. Kruger, lastly, that I'd like to touch on is just unemployment rate amongst graduates as well. For many years now, this has been topical. How are people using their traditional degrees where they find that they aren't finding employment for those courses that they've studied for different jobs and different opportunities?
So when it comes in practice, formal absorption is rather tied to the graduate process. And a lot of the times, what we're seeing is they're converting their degrees to adjacent work. So tutoring, compliance support, project delivery, digital services, and even entrepreneurships and micro enterprises. So the degree is remaining the baseline signal of employability. It shows that you can do amazing work, you can commit to a certain area. But the labor premium, though, is increasingly difficult to attach. So what we're seeing from a graduate perspective, and it's something I'll discuss at another conference in next month, is we're trying to get our graduates to build a portfolio of evidence of if you are a BCom or a NAS provider, you have a degree, but when you exit that degree, you have a portfolio of evidence of what you can do in terms of your skills. I can do accounting, but I can also articulate an AI agent that can automate your accounting functions for you. So we're trying to get those graduates ready for the working world, but making them uniquely positioned to prove their skills as they're entering this job market.
I think that's a positive note to end our discussion on. Dr. Kruger, thank you so much for your insights this evening.